Hello, and welcome back to Network to Code's Nautobot Navigator series. My name is Tim Shryack, and I'm the Director of Sales Engineering here at Network to Code. I will be your guide as we navigate the complexities of network automation. Whether you are a network engineer or an automation enthusiast, this series is designed to get you started towards great success with Nautobot. Please feel free to follow along with me in our public Nautobot Sandbox at demo.nautobot.com, as you can see here in the link in the video, as well as in the description. You can log in using the username and password as shown here on the screen right above the login box. In our second video, we learned how to populate and unlock the functionality of Nautobot's IPAM features. This video, we're going to focus on the concepts of using provider circuits and tracking your physical power infrastructure. So we're going to look at the different concepts needed in order to populate and use the provider circuit functionality within Nautobot. And then we will take a look at the power management functionality within Nautobot, specifically focusing on power feeds and panels. So with that, let's get started. The first topic we're going to cover is looking at circuits within Nautobot. So as we can see here on the left-hand side of the screen, we have our navigation menu bar, and we can choose circuits from the list. So let's take a look at the options available to us under circuits. If you've seen other videos here on the Nautobot Navigator series, you may remember that you can always set the fields that are available to you on any Nautobot screen by clicking Configure and choosing the fields you wish to see. So feel free to come in here and take a look at that on any screen. You can select all or just some of them, whatever is available for you, so that you're making sure you're getting all the data you expected. So here we have all of the fields selected, so we can see every possible option you might have under your circuits. We have the circuit ID, the provider, the circuit type, status, tenant, side A and side Z of the circuit, the date it was installed, the commit rate from our vendor, the description, tags, and prefix. We'll go through each of those here in a minute. So let's go into an example. We're going to start off here with this example we have set up from NTT. So first you'll notice the status field. This is where we can set the particular status for this circuit, whether it's active or decommissioned or planned, would be some examples that you might wish to set here. The provider, of course, this is our vendor, whether it's NTT or AT&T or whatever provider you happen to be buying your circuits from. The circuit ID as provided by the vendor, of course, we want to document that. And then the circuit type. This is the method by which we're using the circuit. So whether it's a transit circuit or MPLS or maybe SD-WAN, this is a user-defined field, and you can associate whatever makes sense for you, so helping you categorize your circuits. Makes it easy to get a quick view, especially if you have a lot of them. It helps you to group them into contexts that make sense. Tenant. Now, if you are operating in an environment where you don't have any tenants or sub-business units, perhaps, that you care about, you don't need to use this field other than perhaps setting one main tenant that you're using across all of your environment. But if you do have this idea of multi-tenancy, you can use this field to help segregate your various options. So similar to circuit type, but now more at a business level, I can group and categorize my circuits or any other field within Nautobot for that matter. The install date. This could be the date that the circuit went active or perhaps the first date of billing. It's your option to use, not a required field. You can choose whether to use this or not. The commit rate. This is our minimum bandwidth committed to by the vendor. Again, it's here for documentation purposes. Your choice whether you use this field. Description. Here you can put any option text you would like. This is simply to help you identify the circuit, perhaps something more human-friendly than a circuit ID. Under the relationship section, you'll notice the prefix is called out here, so we understand what prefix is assigned to this circuit, and as well as stored over in the IPAM section of Nautobot. And then we go into the termination points of the circuit itself. So something to understand about how this is documented in Nautobot. You can have 0, 1, or 2 termination points assigned to a circuit. Let's discuss why you might have those. So in the case of 0, this is where you just want to document the fact that the circuit exists and you don't care about what router it's attached to. Or perhaps the router is not managed by you. Maybe it's managed by your vendor. You just want to track the circuit ID and the vendor and maybe some vendor contact information here in Nautobot. You don't care about the router that it's actually connected to. So that would be the case of 0 termination points. In the case of 1 termination point, that means the one of the routers, the one on your side, belongs to you, and you want to track where it's connected to, what it's plugged into, what IP address is used, what interface on that router is used. So that would be an example, would be a great, a DIA internet circuit would be a perfect example of using 1 termination point. 2 termination points would be typically some form of point-to-point circuit, or perhaps an MPLS circuit, where you are managing the routers on either end of the circuit, and in which case you want to document and track both. So keep that in mind. You don't have to have any termination points, or you can have up to 2. And then you'll notice as we look at the circuit maintenances down here, this is an optional field that you can use if you install the circuit maintenance app available to you in Nautobot's GitHub repository. And you can then track the maintenance notifications coming from your vendors automatically. Nautobot can be configured to receive the emails from the vendors and automatically put your maintenance information into Nautobot's menus so you can understand when you have circuits going down for maintenance or available to use. This can also be potentially configured to automatically put your circuits into maintenance mode in your telemetry or monitoring solution if desired. So these are all great automated features that you can take advantage of with the Nautobot platform, particularly as you start to use all of the applications available to you in the Nautobot ecosystem. So now let's take a look at our circuit types. As we were mentioning before, these are optional fields available to you that you can use to track and group your circuits into things that make sense in your business. So whether that's something like dark fiber, MPLS, transit, these are all user defined. You can configure this however you wish. And you will notice you also can see all of the circuits that are in that particular group. So if we click on transit, for example, here, we will see all the circuits that have been assigned to the type of transit listed here for us. So we get a nice report to see what we have in that particular group. And then as we continue down the menu tree, looking at our providers, very similar, right? We have a list of our providers, the ASN assigned there, and then all of the circuits assigned to that particular provider. So similarly, like if we click into NTT, we'll see some of the details here. You can see how you can track things like contact information, your account number, and then how many circuits you have available for there. And here you can see all of the list of those circuits. So really helpful from a tracking and maintenance perspective to be able to have all that information in one glance. You'll also notice here some information here on the circuit maintenance application. You can see here we're entering things like the email address that is used by the circuit maintenance app to receive those notifications from the vendor, for example, as well as how to parse out that email from the vendor. The maintenance application does have built in a series of parsers that can understand a lot of the major providers. And if one is not supported that you are using, it's quite easy to add that parser in so that you can now understand those emails coming from that vendor and automatically put your maintenance notifications here into Nautobot. One thing to keep in mind, every circuit that you enter into Nautobot needs to be associated with a provider, and the circuit ID has to be unique within that provider. So anytime you go to create a circuit, make sure you have that provider already created before you start creating the circuit so that you won't get stuck on that point and have to go back and then create the provider first. So if it's a new provider to your organization, make sure you enter the provider information before you start adding circuits. So let's take a look at an example of creating a connection of, let's say, a point-to-point between two sites. Now, in our case, we're going to start off by creating that circuit, and we're going to create it between one of our sites in Jersey City and another one in New York City. So as in almost all fields within Nautobot, keep in mind, you could always do this in two ways. One, you can either click the plus sign over here on the left-hand side of the menu tree, or you can drill into the details of that particular field and then click on the add over here on the detail side. So whichever way you do it brings you to the same place. So here in this case, let's just say we're getting a circuit from AT&T and we're going to get a new circuit. It's going to be ECKKT. You know how providers love to create these crazy circuit IDs that are very, very hard for us to remember. So we'll go ahead and enter that there. Our circuit type is going to be a transit circuit. In our case, that's what we decided we're going to call it, and we're going to set it up as planned. Install date will be sometime maybe next week or in a couple of weeks from now, and we're going to get a commit rate of 100,000 or 100K. We don't need any of these other fields, so we're going to go ahead and skip those for now. We could always add them in later if desired. So here it is. We can see now we've created this circuit that we're going to be getting from AT&T and all of the information that we need relevant to the circuit itself. The next step is going to be to create our IPAM side of the world. So that's all the IP address or the network that has been provided to us by the vendor as part of this circuit service. So we're going to go over to the left-hand side under IPAM, and we're going to first click on prefix because we want to start off with the prefix and add that in first. So now we're ready to create our prefix that we're going to use. So here we are on the left-hand side. Again, we can either click the plus sign here by prefix or click add up here on the top, either way. So let's go ahead and get our prefix added. It's going to be 144.8.4.40, and it's a /30 because this is a point-to-point circuit. Namespace will be in our global namespace, and the type will be of type network. Status we're going to set to active, and that is all of the fields that we need to add in order to create the prefix. So first thing here, we've got our prefix now created, and now we need to add the IP addresses or the /32s that belong to that prefix that are actually going to get assigned to the routers. So there's a couple of ways we could do this. One, we can click here over the IP address tab, or of course we could go into the IP address section and do it there. But since we're here already under our prefix, let's just stay here. So we'll go ahead and click on the IP address tab, and we'll see that Nautobot's telling us, hey, you've got 2 IPs available. And this is a good way to double check. Hey, did I use the right mask? Helping you remember like, oh, maybe you used the wrong mask, and that would highlight here for you as well. So let's go ahead and add an IP address here, and you'll notice Nautobot does automatically populate that first one there for you, so it makes it easy. And we could just quickly, easily add in these IPs. So of course, the namespace will be global. It has to be because the parent prefix is in the global. Remember, you can't override that on your IP addresses. Once you're in the namespace by the parent prefix, that's where you're going to be stuck. So if you made a mistake there, you're going to have to go back to the prefix to fix that. The type will be of type host, and we're going to set it to active. So now we can go ahead and create that first IP of the prefix, and we can see here created. Right? So now we can quickly just go back to that parent prefix so that we can create the second IP address within the network. Here, the one attached to the B side of the circuit. Again, Nautobot quickly populating that for us. All we have to do is select the status of active, and that's it, right? Ready to go, click create. So now we have our 2 IP addresses within the prefix now created. We can see those here, and we can see as we look at the overall prefix that it is now 100% utilized because it's just a network of 2, right? Pretty easy. So there's our IPAM work done. So now we're ready to start assigning these IP addresses to the routers themselves. So first, let's start on the Jersey City side. We're going to drill into the devices menu and go into the devices submenu and do a quick search for Jersey City. Now you could type the whole name out, you could search through the menu trees, whatever makes sense for you. But here in this case, I know I could just enter JCY and get all of my Jersey City devices. Pretty easy. Let's go into the backbone router where we're going to connect it to. Now we're going to go onto the interfaces tab because that's where we're going to assign this. And in this case, we're going to connect it to the Gig Ethernet 1 port. So now we want to assign out that IP address to this particular interface. So we'll click on the little plus, add an IP address indicator here, and come into our IP address section. And here we're going to use the Assign IP tab to search for that IP that we created in the IPAM section of Nautobot. So there's a couple ways, again, you could search here. Let's just try it by searching on the first bits of the prefix. You could type the whole thing out if you wanted. And we can see here what we have available for us. And we know in this case, we're using the 144.8.4 subnet. So we'll go ahead and drill into that. Select that. And again, choosing our status of active as we assign that here to the device. So that's the A side of the circuit done. And now let's go ahead and do the B side. So we'll search for New York City, find our backbone router over there, and do the same. Click over on the interfaces tab and find the interface that we're plugging the circuit into. Let's just say here it's going to be the 00/1 interface. And we'll go ahead and do the same steps. Assign the IP, do a quick search, 144.8. And as you get used to doing this, it becomes quite quick and easy to do. Doesn't take very long. Set the status to active, and off we go. Update that. And now we have our IP address assigned on the B side. So I've got both of those done. So now we can start to work on the circuit termination points. So we're going to go into back to the Jersey City router. Let's go into our devices, search for Jersey City, get into that backbone router, and we're going to create the termination points now on the interface. Okay, so now that we've created the IPAM information, let's go ahead and actually terminate this circuit on the routers themselves. So before we clicked the add an IP address icon, now we're going to click on the cable icon and we're going to connect a cable for circuit termination. So here we have the A side of the circuit, that is the interface on the router itself. And now we're going to connect it over to our vendor side, that's AT&T in this case. And we have that connection in Jersey City as we created earlier. And the type of connection it is, of course, circuit termination. And then this is now the A side of the circuit. We'll go ahead and set the status to connected since we plugged it in. And that is all the required fields that we have to use here in order to create this connection. So step one on the A side. Now let's go over to the B side of the circuit, or the Z side, sorry, and get that connected as well. So let's go ahead and search for NYC up here in our devices. We'll go into the backbone router again, go to our interfaces, click on the interface here of interface 001, and again, click on connect cable, circuit termination, and do all of the same steps that we just did a minute ago over on the other side of the circuit. But here now we're connecting to the New York side. Set the status to connected, and I think that should be it. We should be good to go ahead and connect that. So now when we look here in Nautobot, we can see the circuit information along with the cable ID that was assigned by Nautobot. You could now put this label on your cable if desired. We now have the connection. We can see that it's connected to Jersey City backbone router on gig E1 and by which particular circuit. You can now see we have some additional fields available to us. For example, the trace button is now available and we can actually look and see what that full path looks like in a nice visualization of that. We can see both the termination points along with the Jersey City side, the New York side, and all of the steps that we take in order to get from point A to point Z in this case. One of the great things about the features here within Nautobot as well is that all of these elements are clickable. So perhaps you wanted to quickly take a look at that circuit information. You wanted to get back to that vendor. Very easy to drill back in there. You can see all of that information about the vendor. Maybe you need to open a ticket. You can quickly get to that. You can also see all of those details that we see here as well. And then perhaps maybe you made a mistake while you were connecting the information here in Nautobot and you realize, that was not the A and the Z side correctly. We do have this handy swap button available for you. You can click that and you can say, actually, I need to switch the A and the Z sides, and Nautobot will do that for you here within the UI. So very nice and easy to manipulate. Maybe perhaps you made a mistake. You can fix that really easily. Okay, that concludes our view of circuits. So now let's move on to taking a look at power. We can document and track power feeds as well as panels here in Nautobot. So we're going to scroll down to the power section within the Nautobot menu tree, and we'll take a look at these examples. So let's start off with power feeds. Again, always keeping in mind, if you don't see all the fields you're expecting to, don't forget you can always come in and select the options that you have. You can see example here where by default, we're not getting all the fields. So we can just go ahead and click select all and click save. Now we have all those fields available to us. We can see what's in the Nautobot database. We have a name we can assign, a particular panel that this feed is connected to, a rack that it's in, status, type of power feed, our supply option, voltage, amps, the phase, max utilization that we have been assigned to by our data center or provider, the cable that we're using to connect, our peer or where it's connected to, the connection type, available power, and any tags that may be associated. So let's go through the power feed fields in detail. Power feeds represent the distribution of power from a power panel to a particular device, typically a PDU, which then is in turn connected to the devices in your racks. So power feed, we first have the power panel. This is the panel providing the feed itself. And then the rack where it is actually terminated to. This is optional because sometimes it isn't applicable, so it depends on your use case. And then the type of feed. This could be our primary or redundant power feed, or A or B power feed, depending on how you classify your power feeds in your environment. The status, of course, is it active or planned as such? And then where it's connected, the particular PDU that is being fed by this power feed. And then utilization. Keeping in mind, this is planned utilization or allocated. This is not actual. So this is how we are making sure that we allocate out appropriately and plan for. This is our intended consumption, not necessarily actual consumption. The way this is calculated, it's calculated based on the rack's utilization, which in turn is calculated based on the device power consumption. So if you take the planned consumption of all the devices in a rack, and then put those together, we end up with our utilization here for this particular feed. Under electrical characteristics, we have here the supply. This could be AC or DC. Under our phase, we're going to have single phase or three phase. Amps, of course, this is the amps provided to us by the provider. Then we have the connection. We have our cable, which of course we can provide a serial number for if we desire. This is where we are able to connect in the power feed to the PDU. The device itself, that is the PDU, and of course the port, the power port of the connected PDU. You can also model out the particular connection type. In here, in this case, we're using an L6330. Path status of how we are connecting this and whether or not what the options are here available to us. You can set this as you wish. Again, this is user-defined information for you. Now let's take a look at power panels. So as we drill into the panels, we'll take a look again at the columns. And again, keeping in mind, we can always come in and see what is automatically available to us from the defaults. And maybe in this case, we didn't want to see tags. So, okay, that's fine. We don't care about the tags. Here we have the name of the panel, its location, any group that it may be assigned or associated with, and then how many feeds are within that power panel. So here we can drill in and we can see those details, right? As we were looking at the feeds earlier, we can see examples of their active, and we have some primaries. And in this case, we don't have any redundant or B-side power feeds coming out of this particular panel as an example. Keeping in mind, the objects in the power panel section, they represent the origin point in Nautobot for electrical power being disseminated to one or more feeds. So as you have your feeds, this is where you're starting all of your feeds from within the location. So this would kind of be essentially your breaker panel, most likely. We can associate then all of the information as appropriate here, whether it's the location and any rack group that it may be associated with, and of course, tags if desired. And then finally, of course, our list of feeds associated here with this particular panel. So that concludes the quick overview of power and how you might track and manage your power consumption or planned power consumption within Nautobot. So in this video, we explored the world of circuits within Nautobot. We learned how to model the connections between your sites and explored associating prefixes and IP addresses for a complete picture. But networks don't exist in a vacuum, and in fact, every device has to be plugged into something and relies on a robust power infrastructure. So we also did a deep dive into Nautobot's power tracking functionality, allowing you to map your power panels and feeds, ensuring a clear view of your physical power layout. Now, understanding how to manually create these objects in Nautobot is a valuable skill, but it's just the first step. Nautobot really shines with its automation capabilities. The tasks we perform today by hand can all be automated using Nautobot's powerful job framework, saving you a lot of time and ensuring consistency. So make sure you continue to dive and learn about how to use Nautobot so you're not always having to do everything by hand. Thanks for joining us on this journey through Nautobot's source of truth functionality. Look forward to seeing you on the next video. Happy navigating.